Hey everybody, this is Paul and I'm excited to share some of George's plants with you and show you the updates. Like, look at all of the Polyrises that I've gotten from him. I think some are repeats, but I mean, look at this one. I don't even know how to really trellis this one. I'll just kind of let it grow along the fence or something.
It's bushing out.
Yeah, I mean, look at the growth. It's insane.
And it seems to be like almost like it doesn't need any support.
Yes, so far, I mean, it will pretty soon, but it was just the big thick nub before.
Right.
And this is definitely not Orahona. It cannot take the same amount of sun. And I did have my friend Linda, and we'll show you the fruit here. You can see it, that she actually grew his Polyrises about 10 years ago. And it did produce a fruit, and it looks different, as you can see. So I'm hoping that this fruit will be very similar. This is the only one that set fruit. This is number 9, and it's definitely a Polyrises, but it does have some unique traits. It's not Orahona, the shape is different, and it was a very different kind of whitish color. So I'm excited to see how dark the flesh will be on this when it's ripe. Now, in addition, I am noticing that I think he's hybridized some of his dragon fruit. So I did talk to the California rare fruit grower on Facebook's Messenger, and he said that he remembered that Paul Thompson and George Emerich Jr. had a competition with dragon fruit. So something regarding hybrids. So once he told me that, I kind of really spent some time staring at these. And again, you see that this is a Polyrises very similar to the other ones I showed you. But then I noticed, I think he's created some of his own hybrids off of this Polyrises. You can see the growth is much different on this one. And it's a little less spiny. And let me show you over here as well. You can see that that growth is definitely different compared to the other Polyrises varieties. There's more fine hairs, it's flatter. So I'm hoping that this could be maybe his Polyrises crossed with his sweet undatus, if I'm lucky. So we'll see, time's gonna tell.
You need fruit.
Yeah, you gotta have fruit and flower to prove it, but you can see that they are just aggressive growers in a part sun environment.
How big was that one when you got it?
This plant, all of this growth is new, so it was up to here.
Dang.
And there's some new branches down there. But honestly, I have so many, I'm just letting them grow, and we'll evaluate them as they produce fruit. I'm gonna trellis some, so let's show you kind of the next phase up the hill. So this section is more of what I think are George's whites and or his hybrids. You can see some have grown taller than me already since we picked them up back in, I believe, June. And you can see the ones on the palm tree trellis are doing great as well. Now, once I learned a bit more about George Emerich, it's actually Emerich Jr. because it's German, I didn't know that. I learned that he was good friends with Paul Thompson, and they actually, George Emerich Sr. carpooled with them to the rare fruit growers meetings. Now, what I found really interesting in Paul Thompson's book is that he describes some dwarf growing varieties of dragon fruit. And I'm really thinking that these could very much well be what he's describing.
Like short segments?
Yeah, you can see how every segment is so short on this plant, and you can see even the new growth is still short. This piece has already has a new branch. So I'm not very familiar, but I do recall in Paul Thompson's book, he talks about a few varieties that are considered dwarf growers. So I'm hoping that I have some of Paul Thompson's unknown varieties in this collection, but again, time will tell. But you can see that these two are definitely growing differently than some of the other whites in the collection of George's plants, which are 48 dragon fruit and 1 epiphylla. Now there is one that I left some rot on, and I want to show you that right now, so let's go see what I have to do next. So out of the 48 plants, there were about 10 or 15 that had this problem here, you can see. So at the stem, it had rotted because the cuttings were stuck all the way down to the bottom of the pot. In other words, they planted the cuttings all the way to the bottom.
Like it went too deep?
Yeah, so watch, I'll show you. So I was trying this one out just to see how the growth was. This piece was actually damaged, but you can see it's only grown really slow compared to the rest. So what I personally do is I find that plants that have this rot at the stem or at the base just don't grow as vigorously. So I like to remove it. So what I'm gonna do for this plant, which is George Emerich number 39, I'm gonna cut it just like that. Now actually I can remove the whole thing. So let's put this on the ground, Scott. So you can see that now I'm gonna take this and put it as a cutting. I'm gonna save this whole thing. I was able to do it to all of these plants over here. You can pan out, Scott. All of those had the same problem. So let me kind of show you what that problem is exactly, so you can know why it's bad. Let me pull up that root ball and I'll show you. So it does root well, but if you look, you can kind of see what happens when you plant your cuttings too deep. It did root better than I thought, so I will say that. But again, I just have no desire to have any rot. It tends to grow with the cold weather.
It's just the cadmium layer is going to go so deep that it rotted all the flesh off.
Yep.
And then it's just sitting there
And it
exposed.
will heal and callus and grow normal eventually. But I just like to eliminate this step and have it re-root. It tends to re-root really quickly. But in this case, you can see it wasn't as deep. Some of the cuttings that I received had rot about that far. So this one in this case wasn't as bad. That's why I left it alone.
And it's rot that you can't see because of the dirt.
Yeah, it's all under the dirt, but then in my experience during the cold weather, it will expand. In other words, it stopped here, you can see, but in my experience, the cold weather, with the frost, it will creep up and expand. So I like to have a brand new kind of flesh to stem cut. And like you can see, I'll show you.
It's like an infection.
Yeah. And so as you can see, like on this one, had the same problem, and it's already rooted. It's in there really thick. And these really mature cuttings, as long as you leave them in dry soil, they'll root rather quickly. Whoops. So I'm gonna put this one in really dry soil tomorrow, back into its proper pot, and I'll leave it in the shade for about 2 weeks, and I won't water it. I'll make sure it stays dry, and it will most likely grow roots. Now the reason why I did this today is because it's the end of season in Southern California. It's starting to get cold, and in my experience, some dragon fruit will not root in the cold weather. So, let me show you, one more update on George's plants, and let's go into the greenhouse to go check out possibly Panama. All right, so here are a few really interesting varieties from George Emerich's collection, and this is number 3 and 15. And I'm starting to really think that these are most likely a variety Paul Thompson called Panama, because they have this bluish color. I don't know if you can see it here. Bluish tint, and they're really horny here on the edges, and their spines are not very large. Now you can see this one, it had rot really bad, like the last plant. You can see it's re-rooted really well. This one did not have rot, and it's been in the greenhouse this whole season, and look, no new growth. So it's definitely thicker, it's getting nutrients, but I was shocked to not see any new growth. So as a result, I took a cutting and gave it to a friend to try out. And I also grafted a piece here because I'm looking for bronze colored growth. One of the unique traits of this plant is it will produce a bronze color branch when it's a new growth. So I'm hoping that this successful union will show some new growth this season before winter hits in Southern California. So maybe we can kind of get closer to confirmation that this is or is not Panama. But either way, this is a very unique blue, and it's different than the variety Broxensis blue. It's definitely a different type of dragon fruit. So there you go. There is an update on most of George's plants. So give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll keep them coming. And hopefully we'll get to taste that fruit really soon for you, and we can cut it open and see what it looks like. All right, take care.